This is a true horrifying story, part 11. This story took place in Qatar in the year 2012. Umar, a 6-year-old boy back in 2012, had two sisters, ages 15 and 16. Back in the day, they used to play a very common game that we all played in the Middle East called Kook and Kook Dhalam, which is hide and seek, and Kook Dhalam is hide and seek in the dark. And usually kids tend to play this game when there are many cousins over during a family gathering. After a night of a big family gathering that happened in Umar's house, the cousins decided to sleep over. They switched the lights off at 12:45 midnight and they decided to play hide and seek in the dark. They had fun playing the first and second rounds. The third round, not really. During the third round, one of Umar's sisters told everyone that the floor was kinda cold. It was a little colder than usual. They thought the AC was on, so they didn't really care and continued playing. While the sisters were in the dark, barely seeing anything, trying to catch everyone that's hiding, they hear a knocking noise under one of the tables. They started laughing, thinking someone was providing them hints. As they approached the table with full excitement of catching someone, something just didn't feel very right. Whoever was under the table had eyes that were shining. But again, eyes do reflect from a small amount of light. As they crouched down and crawled to the table, they started having second thoughts, so they decided to pull out the flashlight. So they flashed whoever's face this was, and they saw something that made their spines freeze from fear. They saw a foot that was very decayed and had scars all over it. It looked like someone was dead under the table. That was no human being. That was a jinn. They jumped from fear and quickly opened the lights, but to find nothing under that table. They quickly ran downstairs to relieve their fear with their parents. And ever since, these two sisters, today being 24, 25 years old, never stepped inside nor slept in a dark room. I had shivers reading this story when it was submitted, because I faced almost a similar occurrence when I played with my cousins hide and seek in the dark back in 2010. This is a true horrifying story, part 12. This story took place in Oman back in 2012. Alejandro, a high school student that lived with both his parents and two siblings. They all moved to a big beautiful villa that was listed for sale. Throughout their stay within the first month, everybody in the house experienced strange activities. The maid in the house would complain about the dining table and chairs being rearranged every morning. His brother would complain about seeing figures moving up and down on the staircase. His father would feel a woman's presence in his room while he sleeps. And his sister would hear dog noises coming from her bathroom. By far, the most horrible jinn incidents one can imagine would take place in that house. But Alejandro still hasn't seen or felt anything. One night, Alejandro was on his bed finishing an assignment for school. He hears a woman crying in the house. He goes outside quick to check up on his mom and sister, but they were both asleep. He goes back to his room and he sees steam coming through the edges of his bathroom door. It seemed as if someone was inside taking a hot shower. He opens the door to clear out the vapor. He ignores what he sees and he ignores what he heard and goes to sleep. Something awakens him during his sleep. Alejandro feels something or someone's breath on the side of his face. He wasn't able to open his eyes from how frightened he was. He sinks deeper and deeper into his sheets while there's someone right there, breathing right next to his face. He got out of bed screaming, waking everybody up. Everyone rushes to his room and find no one there. A few weeks later, after this incident, Alejandro's family has a small Shih Tzu. This Shih Tzu dog has given birth to 7 puppies. They woke up one morning seeing all 7 pups placed in a bucket with a lid on top, suffocating them all. Something in that house tried to kill all of their pets. On that same week, this family found out that the previous owner of this house was a Omani woman that was abnormal. She had psychological issues that made her crazy, and eventually her inner demons made her commit suicide inside that same house. This is a true horrifying story, part 13. In part 11, I spoke about a story that happened in Qatar with a group of cousins that were playing hide and seek in the dark. And then I explained about how I myself have experienced the same thing when I played that game. This story took place back in 2010 in my house when I was 12 years old. As some of you may know, I'm from Dubai. I'm a Muslim. We pray in this house. We've never seen anything nor heard anything. This story happened around March in 2010. The weather was nice outside. We had a big family gathering outdoors with a buffet catering setup. When we were kids, I was only tight with a few cousins. 2 girl cousins and 4 guy cousins. The rest of the cousins were old at the time. We used to play a bunch of different games every time a family gathering is held. Hide and seek, tag and run, board games. My personal favorite was hide and seek in the dark. It was just unique in its own way. You can get very creative with the spots that you hide in. It was already late at night. Most of the guests were gone and the house was empty inside. So I gathered 3 of my cousins and my baby sister, and we played around in the guest's room. It didn't even take a few rounds. Things went wrong right from the very start. I was the one seeking because I lost the shuffle. I was counting outside the room and the girls were inside hiding. I shouted outside, "I'm coming in," as I was opening the door. So I started looking around. I found everyone except one of my cousins. She's still in there hiding. She was 11 at the time. So I go outside, trying to get my sister to spill the beans about where she's hiding. Yeah, I was cheating. And all of a sudden, we all hear our cousin inside giggling, saying, "Ibrahim, stop." We all sunk into the floor as she said that, knowing that there's no one in the room. She's alone inside in pitch darkness. Something was physical with her inside the room, and she thought it was me. She can't even see what it is. My heart dropped. I didn't even want to open the door to see who it was. We all kicked the door open, turned the lights on. What the heck is going on? She stares at us underneath the dressing table with her eyes wide open. "Was there no one in here?" she asked us. No, there wasn't. We run to our moms, bro. We tell them everything, and you know how parents are. They just don't believe their kids. Our moms didn't believe us. Parents, consider the things your kids tell you. Demons are dangerous. Jinns are life-threatening. And to wake you more, jinns usually go after the younger ones. Unfortunately, kids are the ones that sense them the most. This is a true horrifying story, part 14. This story was submitted by Milton, a 23-year-old pilot that is based in the UAE working for an airline company. And this story took place in Napoli, Italy in the year 2021. Now before I jump into his story, I do need to say this. I've personally heard so many stories from friends that are cabin crew staff and pilots. Out of the hundreds of hotels they stayed in internationally, they all witnessed several hotels that were haunted, and the stories I've heard were very disturbing. Milton had a layover flight from Dubai to Napoli. They landed and checked in the hotel that was assigned by the airline. The hotel was very old. Every step on the old wooden floors was squeaking, and the place just smelled musty. Milton gets the keys to his room, and inside his room he noticed a door that connects him to the room right next to his. Later that night, around 10 or 11 p.m. when Milton was ready to go to bed, he hears knocking noises from the room next door, the one he's connected to. He ignores the noises, thinking they're probably drunk guests staying in there. He ignored the noises for a few hours, and then he gave up. He called the hotel desk complaining about this noise, and they responded by saying, "Sir, you're the only guest staying on that floor." His head rushes with adrenaline as he slowly stares at the connected room door. Knock, knock, knock. He hangs up the phone as he reads his prayers. These noises stop. He also noticed a painting in his room that had 4 women wearing white dresses. It didn't really concern him, so he just goes to sleep. He wakes up the next morning for breakfast. He showers and gets ready, and he comes close to the painting, out of curiosity. And he sees only 2 women wearing white dresses. He quickly tells himself, "I was either too tired, or there's something in here messing with my head." So he goes downstairs, has breakfast, and tells the other crew about the story that happened last night. They laugh it off, and he goes back up to his room. And of course, there's only 1 woman in the painting. This is a true horrifying story, part 15. In part 5, I explained in better detail about the jinns, the names and the types of jinns, how they live in their own world. I really recommend watching part 5. The story I'm about to tell you involves a possessed Muslim woman, and she went through an exorcism with Sheikh Abdul Rauf bin Halima. The jinn that possessed this Muslim woman goes by the name Zuzula. The whole clip is posted on YouTube, by the way. The Sheikh started to recite the Quran to make this jinn speak. He wanted answers about how they work. Why are they doing this to humans? And what are their big plots? He would ask the jinn a question and the jinn would refuse to answer, so he would recite more from the Quran to torture and make this jinn speak, until this whole thing was a full-on conversation. The jinn Zuzula exposed Iblis and how he works with known people, and how humans sacrifice a baby's life to have direct contact with Iblis. This jinn has said so many stuff that a lot of us humans did not know about in regards to their world. Zuzula asked the sheikh a question that really caught his attention. She asked him, "Have you heard of the Illuminati?" He said yes, but please tell me more, Zuzula. She said how Iblis, their father, was awaiting his greatest son to arrive. This is the real recording of that specific topic. You can later watch the rest of the video on YouTube.
Son fils le plus grand viendra? Oui. Tu parles de qui? Des jeunes. Oui. Donc les Illuminati préparent des jeunes. Oui. Ah. Et les Illuminati ont des pactes avec Iblis? Bien sûr. Du plus bas degré jusqu'au plus haut.
This is a true horrifying story, part 16. This story took place in Chicago, United States in the year 2017. Before I jump on to the story, I would like to apologize for not posting recently. I was and still am very sick. I'd really appreciate your support. And I did prepare a lot of good content that will be posted as soon as I feel better. Laith, a 23-year-old back in the time, was born and raised in Chicago, Illinois. Laith was staying at his parents' home at the time. The basement was his gaming spot. On one of the nights, he was downstairs in the basement gaming. As Laith was downstairs playing video games at 2 a.m., he felt a very rough, burning feeling on his back. The burning sensation kicked in harder until it got extremely painful. So Laith yelled for help, not knowing what was on his back. His parents woke up and ran downstairs to the basement, and they found a huge scratch on their son's back. After a few minutes, the scratch surprisingly started to fade away and heal. An hour later, Laith went upstairs to brush his teeth and get ready for bed. As he was washing his face, he noticed something through the mirror. He noticed a black figure standing across the toilet, staring at him. He thought it was his little brother messing around. He rubbed the water off his face, but the figure was still there, and it didn't move. Laith decided to chase it very quickly, but that figure completely vanished. After this thing vanished, Laith started yelling so loud, knowing that this was the thing that scratched his back. Laith was never afraid of jinns after that day, knowing that these jinns physically put their hands on him. Laith described it as nothing scary. It was as tall as a young boy, and the face was just not visible. Would you chase after a jinn if it hurt you? This is a true horrifying story, part 17. I got good news and I got bad news. The bad news is this may be the final part of this series. The good news is I might be bringing back true dark web stories very soon. So stay tuned and blow this video up to see how well this series does. Henry, a 15-year-old boy from metropolitan Chicago back in the year 1976. Henry was invited to one of his friend's younger brother's birthday party. The boy turned 7 at the time, so a nice setup was made for the birthday boy. One of the events in that birthday party was having a clown performance. Henry never liked clowns, but surprisingly, Pogo the clown was up next at 12 p.m. The clown was staring at Henry awkwardly while he was performing. And even after the performance, Henry would complain to his friend about how he's creeped out about this clown. Later that evening, the clown approached Henry while he was sitting alone eating the rest of the cake. "Hello, Henry. I'm not scary without the makeup. Believe me, I'm a nice guy," said the clown, and Henry awkwardly laughed. "Do you want to make a quick buck sometime? I could use some woodwork help at my house, and I'll pay you for it," the clown said to Henry. And Henry respectfully rejected that offer and walked away. A few years go by, and Henry never knew who that person he spoke to was. That clown was John Wayne Gacy. Every killer clown movie you have watched was inspired by this serial killer. He raped and murdered 33 young boys in the late 70s. He used to lure boys by dressing up as a clown and attending birthday parties. And 29 out of these 33 victims were buried inside his house that whole time. And Henry he was one agreement away from becoming the next victim. Fortunately, John Wayne Gacy was executed by lethal injection in the year 1994. How do you feel about clowns? We're back on track. This is a true horrifying story, part 18. This story took place in Sharjah, UAE in the year 2011. For those who don't know what black magic is pretty much witchcraft and a process used to summon demons and then come to an agreement to harm a certain individual. Majid, an 18-year-old back then, lived in his parents' home. They all recently moved to a new location after purchasing a new house. The house was big, but it was not new. 3 families have previously lived inside that house, and not one of those families was able to live longer than a year inside that house. Though no negative reviews were made about that house before Majid's father purchased it. After a month of moving furniture, Majid's finally able to sleep in his own bedroom. On the first night, a nightmare awakens Majid. He reads his prayers and he goes back to sleep. The next day, Majid is awakened from his sleep again, dreaming the exact same dream. He reads his prayers and he goes back to sleep. The same thing would happen every single night for 3 months. He gives up and he goes to tell his father about the nightmare situation. What is the dream? His father asks him. I see a 3-year-old child guiding me to the water tank behind the house. And when we both reach the water tank, we're both attacked by a big black dog. That's what I've been dreaming every single night, says Majid. And indeed, there is a huge water tank at the back of the house, and Majid never thought of checking it out. Majid and his father both read their prayers, and they go to that tank. There's a big lid on the top of the tank that is shut tight. They open the lid, and they see nothing inside but clear water. Majid notices a white bag sealed tight thrown all the way deep inside that tank. They manage to get it out, and they find out this was black magic that was placed deep inside that tank for many years, harming a child. Inside the bag, they found human hair. The black dog in the dream represents a demonic presence near that water tank. After an Islamic procedure of undoing the black magic, the child that was potentially harmed should be free. And Majid never got the dream again after that day. Until now, he has no idea who that child was. And why did that child try to contact Majid specifically? And is this child dead or alive? This is a true horrifying story, part 19. This story happened in Kuwait in the year 2014. Faisal, a 22-year-old man that was a ventriloquist by hobby. Ventriloquists are professional entertainers that use dummies to speak without moving their lips. Faisal was always antisocial and had a strange personality ever since he was a child. He never had any friends growing up, and he never performed ventriloquism on a stage before. Faisal only practiced alone in his room, and he would put on a ventriloquism show for other dummies alone. He was lonely. No one ever appreciated the talent he had. This talent used to be a joke among Arabs. One day, he decided to add a special puppet to his collection, and he was in contact with an owner of an antique store in London for many months. A time came where he was able to fly to London and purchase that special dummy that the antique store owner valued so much. The antique dummy was named Toby. Faisal flew to London, met the owner of the store, and he was amazed the first time he saw the puppet Toby. It was like he found the ultimate piece that completed his collection. Faisal purchased the dummy, they packed it well, and they flew it to Kuwait. Ever since the first few days of Toby being inside Faisal's house, things were always just going wrong. Furniture would be out of place, things would go missing, and the piping system would just keep knocking at night. And Faisal's mom would always shout and scream, blaming this dummy Toby. She would scream and shout at Faisal for bringing this cursed toy into the house. Take this thing out of my house, the mom would tell Faisal every single day. And Faisal always thought that his mom was overreacting. Until one day, Faisal found his 5-year-old brother in his bedroom drawing strange symbols on a piece of paper. "What are you drawing?" Faisal asks his younger brother. He responded back by saying, "Toby taught me how to draw," while the puppet Toby was just laying there in front of his younger brother. Just remember, a 5-year-old can barely write letters on paper rather than drawing demonic symbols. They found out a few days later through an Islamic sheikh that the younger brother was writing talasam. Talasam in Islam is known to be a black magic ritual that summons jinns. And Faisal decided that it was time to take Toby back to London. This is a true horrifying story, part 20. This story took place in Salalah, Oman in the year 2017. Oman is known to have a historic significance of black magic, and specifically in caves is where most black magicians used to do their rituals. But you should know that Oman is an Islamic country and it condemns black magic. Fatima, a 16-year-old girl from Muscat, planned a 10-hour road trip to Salalah with her family. They prepared food and drinks, got their camping tents ready, and prepared everything else before they head out. They finally reached to Salalah, and Fatma's father sets up camp and prepares the campfire. Fatima and her sister run off and explore the area. Fatima, shufi. Fatima's sister finds an old cave under a mountain, and they start exploring this cave. The cave was very cold and it smelled like there were dead animals in there. The deeper they go, the stronger the smell gets. Fatima notices talasim carved all over the cave walls. Fatima's sister suddenly stops, stares in front of her with her eyes wide open. They both see a person covered in black with its back facing the girls. This human-like being turns around and screams, "Get out!" Fatima drops her phone from fear and they both run for their lives. They tell their parents what happened and the father agreed to change the camp location. "But I forgot my phone in there," Fatima tells her dad. Fatima's father starts laughing and says, "Don't worry, I'm gonna go get it for you." They all see the father going back inside that same cave, fearing for his life. 1 hour goes by and the dad is still inside that cave. They tried calling him with other phones many times, but there aren't any signals inside caves. An hour and a half later, the dad finally comes out with no reaction whatsoever. He hops in the car without saying a word. Fatima kept asking if he's okay and if he found her phone. He slowly turns around, looks at the girls and says, "I told you girls to leave the cave, but both of you didn't listen." And they both looked at each other confused, but their veins froze when they realized that this wasn't their father that was speaking. The father suffered repetitive jinn possession attacks. Ever since that day, he stepped inside that cave. For 2 years until he passed away in the year 2019. Jinns are real. Possession of a jinn is real. Black magic is real. Don't mess around in caves because jinns can haunt you for eternity if they were disturbed. This is a true horrifying story, part 21. This story took place in Dubai in the year 2016. This story was published by Jules Beck a few months ago on Khalij Times. It was a regular school day, and I was 15 years old at the time. I was laying in bed, and I felt something creep up on me. I couldn't see what it was, as I sleep in pitch darkness. I thought it was just my legs going numb. But then I found out that it wasn't. Whatever this thing was, it was heavy. I can feel it walking up towards me, on my body. I also heard strange noises in my ears. Sounded like something was screaming. I turned to see if something was around me, but there was nothing there. I kept thinking this could have been a nightmare. My mom suddenly walks in, and she says, "It's okay, dear. You're probably having a nightmare. I'm gonna read you prayers, and everything will be fine." This creepy thing went away, and I fell asleep after my mom read her prayers. I woke up the next morning asking myself, wait a second, how did my mom even know I was having nightmares? So I went and asked her, and she looked at me confused. "What are you talking about? I was fast asleep at that time, and I did not walk into your room. This never happened before, and I still wonder till this day if I was alone that night." So that's Jules' story. I want to cover something myself. This is my theory behind this story. This 15-year-old child definitely had something that's known to be called yathum, scientifically known as sleep paralysis, but religiously known to be a demon that paralyzes you during your sleep. This is religiously known. If a house is filled with prayers and members of good deeds, good jinns usually protect the house from bad jinns. And the appearance of the mother walking in was definitely a good jinn protecting that child from a bad entity.